So I was overweight most of my adult life, and it just got worse and worse. At my heaviest, I was 100 pounds heavier than I am today. Uh, and I started having just several health issues as I got older. I'm 44 now, but I'd say in my 30s is kind of when it started. I was diagnosed with IBS. My stomach was just always gurgling and bubbling and hurting me. No matter what I would eat, I would try changing my diet. I tried like a low FODMAP diet and tried more plant-based stuff, and it just was always bothering me. I ended up with a couple of kidney stones, which was some of the worst pain I've ever been in my entire life. Uh, I had my appendix burst on the operating room table, and could have taken me out. Luckily, I went in, was sitting in the emergency room for like 6 or 8 hours or something, and they finally got me back. And just as they got me back and they prepped me, I was sitting on the operating table and the appendix burst. Uh, I also lost my gallbladder. I was having so many stomach issues. I went in, they did an ultrasound on my gallbladder, and the doctor's like, it's kind of borderline. He's like, you probably could just keep it or we could remove it. And I'm like, let's just take it out because nothing is working with all of these stomach issues I'm having. And maybe 50 years ago, it would have been different. Maybe there's some vegetables and plants in there, but um, I believe a lot of the vegetables and a lot of the plants that we hold on such a high pedestal right now are causing all sorts of issues for us that we don't realize.
And they're going to these doctors saying, I'm curing what you said was incurable. And they're cured. It's gone. The problems are gone. The x-rays are great. The blood tests are fantastic. The skin conditions.
There's going to be snow on the ground for months. There's nothing to eat out there except meat and a handful of berries maybe for 1 week.
That's it. And I mean, imagine the whole planet is that forest behind you before kind of civilization. Where were the farms? Like where, you wouldn't have gone digging around in the ground randomly for like a potato because you'd probably die before you even found one.
In this episode of the Meat Medic podcast, I'm thrilled to have Kerry Mann Jr. from Homesteadhow, a prominent figure in the keto and carnivore community. Kerry shares his powerful and transformative health journey, detailing how he overcame a host of chronic health issues, including IBS, depression, sleep apnea, congestive heart failure, and terrible weight problems, all from adopting a carnivore diet. Together, we explore the profound impact of diet and how this has affected his physical and mental health, tackling the limitations of conventional medicine and surprising benefits of a meat-based diet. Kerry also discusses his upcoming documentary, Healing Humanity, which is going to be absolutely amazing. It's going to document real-life stories of people healing through diet, predominantly carnivore, but not exclusively. This conversation delves into why so many people are finding lasting healing and wellness through simple, natural nutrition and challenges modern assumptions about diet, medicine, and health. Whether you're new to the concept or already part of the keto carnivore world, this episode is packed with insights and inspiration.
Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Meat Medic podcast. Today, I'm joined by the amazing Kerry Mann Jr. from Homesteadhow. Of course, you guys probably have heard of him. A lot of people have in this kind of keto carnivore community. Kerry, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're really welcome. It's my pleasure, really. It's always great to have people on the show like yourself who are, big names in the community that can share their story, their journey, which I think is just so incredibly powerful. Now, I've watched some of your stuff, big fan, massive health changes. I'm not going to steal your thunder, though. You please tell us your story, how you found the carnivore diet and what you're calling a proper human diet. And yeah, take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was overweight most of my adult life, and it just got worse and worse. At my heaviest, I was 100 pounds heavier than I am today. And I started having just several health issues as I got older. I'm 44 now, but I'd say in my 30s is kind of when it started. I was diagnosed with IBS. My stomach was just always gurgling and bubbling and hurting me. No matter what I would eat, I would try changing my diet. I tried like a low FODMAP diet and tried more plant-based stuff, and it just was always bothering me. I ended up with a couple of kidney stones, which was some of the worst pain I've ever been in my entire life. I had my appendix burst on the operating room table, and could have taken me out. Luckily, I went in, was sitting in the emergency room for like 6 or 8 hours or something. And they finally got me back. And just as they got me back and they prepped me, I was sitting on the operating table and the appendix burst. Uh, I also lost my gallbladder. I was having so many stomach issues. I went in, they did an ultrasound on my gallbladder, and the doctor's like, it's kind of borderline. He's like, you probably could just keep it or we could remove it. And I'm like, let's just take it out because nothing is working with all of these stomach issues I'm having. And then I was diagnosed with sleep apnea. They put me on a CPAP machine. The biggest issue for me for 15 years or so was depression and anxiety, just horrible depression that got worse and worse. I didn't do anything about it for quite a while until finally my wife is like, you have to get some help. So she took me in and went through all the proper channels, sort of the standard of care. They put me on antidepressant SSRIs, told me it's going to take about 3 months before we know if these are going to work for you or not, which was very discouraging. Uh,
Mm.
and I did it for 3 months, and then it was like nothing. And they're like, "Oh, that's okay. We'll have to up your dosage a little bit, but it's going to take another 3 months before we know if it works." And I swear I did that on the first medication for probably like a year, upping the dosage every couple of months. And then they're like, "Let's switch it." And I was on every sort of medication. My depression just got worse and worse. Started getting insomnia. And one of the biggest things that happened to me was about 8 years ago. I was at home and I was depressed. I was kind of plopped down on the couch and I went to stand up and I got really dizzy. My fingers were kind of numb and my lip was dropped a little bit. I was just confused. My wife was asking me what's going on. I couldn't find the words to tell her what was going on. She called 911 and I had a TIA mini stroke. And I think I was 36 or 38 at the time, so pretty young. And I went into the hospital. I was like 5 days in the stroke unit. They're like, "What is wrong with this guy? He's got so many health issues. You're so young to be having a mini stroke." So they did a bunch of tests on me, and they tested my heart, and they diagnosed me with congestive heart failure. My ejection fraction was 44, and for those that are listening that aren't familiar, I was learning all of this new. When they said congestive heart failure, I'm like, am I gonna die? Like, what does this mean? Like
Yeah.
heart failure, that sounds pretty extreme, but it means your heart can't keep up with the needs of your body. It's just not pumping enough blood to give your body everything it needs for the output sort of thing. So they put me on medications for that, and my depression just kept getting worse over the last several years. And then about 2 years ago or so, all of a sudden I got this horrible pain in my foot, and they diagnosed me with gout. Even though I kind of told my doctor, I'm like, I don't think this is gout. The guy was like, "You have some of the symptoms?" He's like, "Anyone in your family have gout?" I was like, "Yeah, my dad does." He's like, "Yeah, you definitely got gout then." But I didn't have a lot of the other symptoms. But anyhow, that's what they diagnosed me with. They gave me more medication, and by this point, I was on just this whole bin of medications. I was on about 15 different medications for depression, anxiety, sleep, gout, heart issues, statins. Um, there was many more in there that I'm forgetting right now as well. And then they were giving me injections for the gout, and it was so painful. Like it felt like a fractured bone. I could barely walk on it. So I was a mess, 100 pounds heavier than I should have been. I was just so sick of being sick, miserable, brain fog, fatigue. And I found carnivore diet through YouTube. I was watching one day, and there's this man, Dante Ferrigno, doing a video talking about how he was just going to eat meat for 90 days. And I thought, this guy's crazy. You're gonna you're gonna clog your arteries. You're gonna have a heart attack. I've got congestive heart failure. I can't just eat meat. Uh, but I knew about the ketogenic diet, and I had tested that on and off. And this is the only thing I've ever had some success with over the years. I never could maintain ketogenic diet. I would lose a bunch of weight, go back to moderation, and then I'd gain all the weight back. And then all those keto snacks and treats, those got me for a long time as well. But anyways, I was watching this video from Dante, and I realized it was 2 years old. And my wife and I were watching it on TV. It was a YouTube video. I'm like, let's fast forward to present day. There's no way this guy's eating meat 2 years later. And by the way, he had all of my issues: overweight, obesity, depression, IBS, lots of stomach issues. So his story really resonated with me. I'm like, I feel for you. We fast forwarded, watched his most recent video. I couldn't even recognize him. He had lost all of his weight, just had this huge smile on his face. He had this glow. It was kind of remarkable, and he overcame IBS and all of these other things. So that really inspired me and made me, I still wasn't committed to doing it yet. I'm like, oh, he's just an outlier, like coming up with all these excuses. And then I found Dr. Ken Berry, and I probably watched 1,000 of his videos. And the last thing that happened, sort of my turning point that convinced me to start carnivore, was it was a Dr. Berry video that was how to reverse type 2 diabetes. And all of my health issues and ailments, I was probably pre-diabetic, but I was never diagnosed with that. So I don't even know why I was watching that video. I have family members with type 2 diabetes. And from my understanding as just a layman, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, barely graduated high school. Like, I don't know much about any of this stuff. But all of my family members that had type 2 diabetes, I was told or under the impression like that's a genetic issue. There's something wrong with them. Their body just can't process carbohydrates, insulin. It's something they're always going to have, because I saw these same people for years and years, and they're doing the glucose monitor, but they're still eating the junk. And when I saw that video by Dr. Berry, the first comment said, "Dr. Berry, you saved my life." And I get goosebumps now thinking about it. I'm like, that's crazy. This YouTube doctor, who, by the way, even though I watched his 1,000 videos, I'm like, this guy's pulling a scam here. There's no way he's talking about eating bacon and meat. And like, I kept trying to figure it out too. I'm like, what is he selling? There's going to be like, give me $1,000 for my diet program. And there was nothing. It was just like, eat proper human foods and heal. Like, you don't have to pay for anything. And then I kept reading those comments. I'm like, if this guy's scamming people, all of these comments are true. There were 2,000 comments. I'm like, he just hired a bunch of people to say, you saved my life, you saved my life, like over and over again. My A1C was this, now it's this. One of the comments said, 10 minutes of watching your videos, Dr. Berry, changed my life more than going to my regular doctor for 10 years. That really resonated with me too, as I'm looking at my bin of 15 medications I was on, and just realizing like, taken some of those medications for 10 years and I'm not getting any better. Like, why do I continue to take these things and get sicker and sicker? So that was my turning point when I decided to finally start carnivore.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just nodding along to that entire thing, and it's so powerful because it's almost my story as well. It's everyone's story, basically. But so many health issues there, so many things that we can touch on. Yeah, interesting. The congestive heart failure. I mean, I have a history of that as well myself personally. After a heart infection when my second daughter was born, 3 days after she was born, I ended up in hospital for 3 days. My wife thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to die. Totally unrelated to diet. It was a viral thing, but so I know how that feels. It's hard to describe how it feels. Like you just can't do anything. You've got no energy. It's just you almost just feel trapped in your own body. It's crazy. And mine wasn't as bad as yours. I think I was left with about 50% ejection fraction. Hopefully yours is kind of healing now. I mean, where are you at with stuff like that now?
Yeah, well, you described it really well. That's what it was. I couldn't do anything. Like, I'd stand up, I'd get fatigued. I'd be gung ho in the morning because we live on a homestead. So I'm like, we gotta cut some firewood today. I'd go out with the chainsaw, and by the time I just got out there, I was just like gasping for air and always fatigued and tired. Yeah, so when they diagnosed me with the congestive heart failure, ejection fraction 44, I did a heart echo. I also did a heart catheter. Like, I did all sorts of tests for that. They told me this is chronic, and the best you can hope to do is maybe keep it the same, but it's probably going to get worse over time. And so I'm like, I'm living with this forever now. I'm always going to be fatigued and tired. But after 1 year on carnivore, I felt so incredible. And the standing up thing, that was my big sort of symptom. Every time I'd stand up, I'd get dizzy. That stopped happening. And then I started exercising on carnivore, which I never exercised my whole life. I just started getting this excess energy. I started doing resistance bands, and I started doing pull-ups and going for walks and things like that. I'm like, I feel like I could just run a marathon now. I could barely stand up before. So I went into the doctor, cardiologist, at 1 year, and I'm like, let's do this test again. They got me in for a heart echo, and they tested it, and my ejection fraction, which was 44 before, is 65 now, which is perfectly normal. Again, I'm a layman. I was like, why didn't I get 100%? Like, why am I only at 65? But for those watching, 65 is like perfection. You can't really go back. You don't want 100. I think you'd probably die or something if you had 100. And the other crazy thing was, if that's not crazy enough, the other crazy thing was I had a lifelong, highly erratic, irregular heartbeat since birth. for 43 years. Every time I'd go to the doctor, which was hundreds of times, the nurse would check your blood pressure and heartbeat. Every time she's like, whoa, you realize you have an irregular heartbeat? And every time I'm like, yes, you guys tell me this every time. It's like, it's in my notes. I've worn like 25 heart monitors all throughout high school, middle school, always putting the heart monitors on. After 1 year on carnivore, they checked my ejection fraction, congestive heart failure reversed. My lifelong irregular heartbeat is normal for the first time in 43 years, which is just, that blows my mind even more than the congestive heart failure, just due to the fact that I have had that since birth. I've heard of a few other people say I have an irregular heartbeat every now and then or rapid beats, and that stabilized for them on carnivore. But the lifelong thing is just crazy to me. So yeah, by every account and measure, my heart is significantly better on carnivore, including my blood pressure, pulse, things like that are all normalized on carnivore. Um, yeah, I feel it too. So I went in at that 1 year point. Only doctor's appointment I've ever gone into that I had no reason to go in other than I just wanted to verify these numbers for myself. Didn't have anything wrong with me for the first time.
I mean, that must have been a pretty amazing feeling coming out of that appointment, knowing you've made those changes.
It was absolutely like I get a little teary-eyed thinking about it. It was kind of emotional because for me, that was my biggest deterrent or reason not to do this. I'm like, I have congestive heart failure. I can't eat meat. I've been told my whole life meat's going to clog my arteries. So the fact that I did that and it worked was pretty remarkable. And I was just so happy too because it was ruining my life. Like, and not just my life. On one hand, I'm like, I'm a grown man, I'm a big boy, right? I could just suck it up, but it's taking my whole family with. I'm just riding it out on the couch. I've got 4 children, and they're looking at why is dad so sad all the time? Why is dad so fatigued all the time? So it's affecting everything in my life. So I was pretty excited for sure. Although I was a little upset with the doctor that I met with, not to kill the messenger because he wasn't like my lifelong doctor or anything, but I was telling him like, this is crazy. My ejection fraction's normal. My regular heartbeat's reversed. I'm like, all that medication I was on for 15 years for suicidal clinical depression. I'm like, I'm happy now. I have no depression. I have no anxiety. My IBS is gone. And he just went, interesting, interesting. That's all he kept saying over and over again. And I was thinking at that time, I'm like, well, whatever. Again, I don't care. I'm a grown adult. I figured this out. I'm good now. But it really made me upset because I'm just thinking there's so many other people hopeless like me that are going to go in and see this guy. And the only thing he's going to do is get that prescription pad out and say, here's some medication, here's this, and never address the root cause of the problem, which was all of those pills I was on. The root cause for every single one of them, 15 pills, was just my nutrition and the food I was eating.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like you're being a bit polite there, saying you were a bit upset. I mean, if it was me, I mean, I'm pissed off hearing that.
Yeah.
Let's say it how it is. And as a doctor myself, as a GP, a family doctor, and I'm referring my patients to these other specialists like cardiologists, dermatologists, rheumatologists. I know your daughter had a lot of skin issues, didn't she, Lily? And my experience there is these people are curing these conditions with a basically carnivore. It's one step beyond keto. It's basically carnivore or a very strict or slightly relaxed, but either way, it still really generally works. And they're going to these doctors saying, I'm curing what you said was incurable. And they're cured. It's gone. The problems are gone. The X-rays are great. The blood tests are fantastic. The skin conditions cleared up. Colonoscopy is completely normal. And then the doctors are just like, okay, I guess you don't need me anymore. Off you go.
Yeah.
And there's no like, wow, like, oh my God, like you've cured the incurable.
Right.
Please tell me more. I must learn. I must take this to my patients. No, it's just, no.
Yeah. You get me fired up the more I think about it too, because I'm like, you are dedicating your life to healing people. Like it's a noble profession. You went to school for so long. And again, I barely graduated high school. I was able to stumble around in the dark and figure this out. You should want to know more. The thing too that I started realizing in retrospect was, like, what is it? The Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. When I really think about it, I don't want any attention. I'm not going to sue anyone or anything like that. But the do no harm thing, I'm like, that actually did a lot of harm to me, especially just prescribing the same medications for the antidepressant medication in particular. that turned me into a zombie, like just an emotionless zombie. And then I started eating more. A lot of those SSRIs, they're known to cause people to eat more. So my weight increased. That probably perpetuated my congestive heart failure, getting to 100 pounds heavier than I should have been. Definitely could have been good on my heart amongst all the other things. So it's like, it's not even just the negligence of not fixing the issues. It's like, I actually did a lot of damage. And I don't know, maybe I kind of fell through the cracks because I'd go on another medication and then I would have side effects from that. And it just, this cascade of medications just kept adding up over the years and years. So, I go and visit one guy. I can't really blame this one guy. And then I go see a different one and a different one. That's another part of the problem, I think, with healthcare is everything's so siloed. It's like, okay, go see this heart guy. Now go see this stomach guy. Now go see this guy. None of them are talking to each other, but it's all just the same root cause.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of smiling because I just put out an episode on my channel about, the broken medical system. And these are one of the things that I mentioned, this siloing of healthcare, just separating it out into all these things. You go to the cardiologist for your heart, you go to the dermatologist for your skin, rheumatologist for your joints, gastroenterologist for your gut. No one's putting it together and just saying like, this is a systemic problem. Like, what's actually the root cause of all these things? You mentioned the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm. And I get asked this question a lot by patients, by people who come on the show and so on, what, like, why do doctors do this? And I always kind of say, like, it's not their fault. They're trying their best and, so on. But I don't know, I guess you just made me think, at what point do you say, are they actually trying their best? If they're being told that you can cure incurable illnesses, and showed, I'm not just, it's one thing to just tell someone, when the cardiologist is doing that echo on you and saying, oh my God, you've cured what I thought was incurable. Like, at what point are you negligent if you're not actually taking that on board?
Right.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It blows my mind too. Just, I don't know. I get the thing too. We got to do standard of care. They're scared about getting sued and things like that. But there's doctors like yourself and a lot of other doctors that are figuring this out. And they're like, no, I went into this to heal thing. The healing that you're seeing with this too is just absolutely incredible. It's like, it would be such an amazing thing for these doctors to be able to experience that. I want to ask that doctor that just kept saying interesting to me, interesting over and over again. How many people have come to you and said, you healed me? Like, I'm good. Like, that's incredible, right? Dr. Barry's getting it. I'm sure you're getting it on your YouTube channel now. All these other good doctors are as well. And the thing is, I did a video about this before, and I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back. I'm saying it to show just how broken the system is. I'm a homesteader. I do homesteading YouTube videos, right? Like, oh, we built a greenhouse, we got a chicken. Now I've been doing more carnivore videos. I have had over 100 people through comments or directly on a video talking to me saying, Kerry, you saved my life. I saw your carnivore video a year ago or 30 days ago. I did this. And I had one woman, her name's Renee. She had an advanced autoimmune disorder. She could barely walk. She said, Kerry, I owe you my walking. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what do I even say to that? It's so humbling and so crazy. But then I get pissed off about that because I'm like, how broken is the system that the only way all of these people can find healing is from some homesteading YouTuber who barely graduated high school? It's like so crazy how broken it is.
I know, it's absolutely true. And I'm nodding along because, I mean, I see this as well. I've had people commenting, of course, like yourself, but I also see it in person, with patients curing these incurable illnesses, healing these terrible afflictions. It makes me so angry that nobody's told them this before. And it makes me so angry that, also that people are not, the doctors are not also, talking about this.
Hey guys, I'm really sorry to interrupt this show with this ad, but I could not wait to tell you about it. I'm so excited. I have relaunched the website, themeatmedic.com, with our brand new site and brand new community features, as well as new guides and new courses. Make sure you check out the website at themeatmedic.com and sign up free for our community. If you want to take your health to the next level, though, we do have paid membership options available with access to a private podcast with myself, exclusive live Q&A every single week. And if you really want to take it to the next level, you can sign up for our gold tier with free, unlimited access to all courses and all products available on themeatmedic.com. Thank you guys, and we'll get back to the episode.
I wanted to ask you about your issues with depression, because this was a big thing that you spoke about on your channel. That was, you've obviously had a lot of issues health-wise, but depression was one of the really big ones that you had. Tell me, if you could tell me a bit more about your experience there with your medications, your experience of all of that, and then how carnivores helped you with that depression.
Yeah, absolutely. So depression, out of all of my many, many health issues, was definitely the worst issue I've ever had. Uh, Probably for about 15 years, it gradually got worse and worse. And depression is a tough thing to describe to people that haven't been through it. And unfortunately, a lot of people think, I know what it's like to be sad, but depression is a lot different than being sad. It's almost like looking at life through a totally different lens where everything is hopeless and everything is negative. And that's what it was for me. And it ended up getting worse and worse to the point I had suicidal depression, suicidal thoughts. I had insomnia, just completely black, dark hopelessness, just to the point you're just justifying why it would be better for me not to be on this earth anymore, sort of thing. And I went in and got help. I think my wife forced me to, because I don't know, I'm kind of foolish that way. Just what's it going to do? And they gave me medication, and the medication, maybe it helped me in that I'm still here in terms of like the suicidal depression, but it turned me into like an emotionless zombie. And I have since heard many people say the same thing about these antidepressant SSRI medications. There was no good or bad. It was just kind of like nothing. And still had the thoughts every now and then, but maybe not quite as bad. But I tried every medication. I was on just all sorts of medications and messing around with the dosages to try to get it to work, and nothing ever worked. I never got to a point where I'm like, I feel great now. I feel better. This is helping. And my weight started gaining because of it. There's other side effects with the antidepressant medication as well. My anxiety was just always horrible most of my life, and throughout the worst of the depression, the anxiety was terrible as well. Just every single thing I just ruminate on and worry about. Like this call with you, we scheduled it. Let's say we scheduled it a week ago. I'd have been thinking about it every night. Oh, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? Just worrying needlessly. And so when I started carnivore, it was about 3 weeks in, I had this whoa moment, like something's going on here. My mood just felt drastically different. And I'm not saying that at 3 weeks I overcame my lifelong battle with depression, but something significant happened right around 3 weeks. Anxiety was down, my mood was improved, and it was a noticeable moment for me. And it just got better and better from there. To I was able to wean off my antidepressant medications, which I did with my doctors. I always tell people that's really, really important. I'm kind of foolish with things like that, but that is not something you want to mess around with at all. So I was able to wean off my antidepressant medications and the sleep medications. And I got to the point where I would have given anything to just be at a baseline. That's when I was in the worst depression, I used to be jealous of people. I'm like, man, wish I could just be kind of like them, just normal. But it switched for me to where I am the opposite of whatever that hopeless dark depression was. Like I'm just full of joy and gratitude. I would have been anything to just be baseline, and I'm literally at the opposite end of it. So when that started happening for me on carnivore, I was elated, excited, like overjoyed. And then that was kind of where the whole idea to do this documentary was. There's so many people with depression now, younger and younger generations. I just saw a statistic. It's like 1 billion people with a B right now have mental health disorders. That's probably way underreported because, like me, a lot of people don't report it. They walk around with it. And the thing that really drives me nuts is it's hitting this younger and younger generation more and more. So like this is a powerful tool. And when I first started talking about it on my YouTube channel, it was one of the most prevalent comments I got back. I had anxiety. It went away on carnivore. I had depression. People with type 2 bipolar disorder, people with schizophrenia. And I've interviewed a ton of people for our documentary or just on my YouTube channel. And almost every single one of them, they'll do carnivore for one reason or another. A lot of them to lose weight or type 2 diabetes or fatty liver, but almost every one of them says, I didn't realize how bad my depression was or anxiety was or brain fog was until I got out of it. So that was the main reason I wanted to do the documentary, was 100% mental health, give people another tool in the toolbox or some hope. I would have given anything after 15 years of all those medications. I would have given anything just for another tool. just for something else to try, and something that's just, it's real. What am I advocating for? It sounds crazy at first, eating meat, but really all it is returning to what's natural for humans. And eating meat is the most natural thing we can eat given all of the options we have right now.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I've just put out an episode of, what is the optimum human diet? What is the proper human diet? And yeah, I think it's, there's really no doubt it's a meat-based diet. There's really no doubt. You can perhaps argue some of the finer points, but there's really no doubt it's a meat-based diet. What do you think? What do you think the optimum human diet is? Now that you've had your experience through your previous issues, I mean, depression, you've had the mini stroke. I mean, my God, 36, 37, I think you said you were having a mini stroke, congestive heart failure, similar to myself, but maybe worse, gout. You're on loads. I'm just going through all my notes here, just the crippling anxiety and depression and so on. All of that, basically resolving when you switch to a carnivore diet. What do you think the optimum human diet is?
Great question. So, given this very moment in time where we are right now, I believe it's meat, ruminant meat. For me, it's beef. Grass-fed, grass-finished is the best. And water. Beef, salt, and water. That's it. And I know that's very sobering and crazy for a lot of people to hear. And maybe 50 years ago, it would have been different. Maybe there's some vegetables and plants in there, but um, I believe a lot of the vegetables and a lot of the plants that we hold on such a high pedestal right now are causing all sorts of issues for us that we don't realize. For me, prior to doing carnivore, I tried everything. And there was a year where I did strict ketogenic, whole food, plant-based diet, salad for lunch, salad for dinner, no junk, no garbage, no sugar, super clean. I still had horrible IBS. I still had the depression, still had sleep issues and anxiety and all of that stuff. It wasn't until I added the meat back. The thing with the vegetables and the plants that people don't realize is man has perverted these things so much. Like a piece of fruit right now, an apple is huge. An apple back in the day was this big. An apple now, for me, it's like a big ball of sugar. If I were to eat an apple right now, it converts in my blood to glucose, and I'm going to be jonesed in like an hour later for something else. And that's what I did on the standard American diet. I'm going to have an apple right now. 2 hours later, I'm eating a granola bar or something else because, oh gosh, I'm hungry again. I'm hungry again because his blood sugars are going up and down. But the pesticides and glyphosate that are in these things, there's also, we talked about this before, there's a lot of defense mechanisms in vegetables and plants that people don't realize. I believe those are damaging our guts more than people understand. And then on top of it, you have pesticides and glyphosate. And glyphosate is the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. I think there's going to be a lot of information coming out about it more in the future. But I was watching this one doctor talk about, they tested air and water samples, and glyphosate is in 70% of air and rain samples that come down. It's literally everywhere right now. Glyphosate is used everywhere, and it's actually an antibiotic if you Google it. And so humans are ingesting low levels of antibiotics for years and years, decades and decades. And people will say, well, it's the dose that matters, which is true. But if you're having a dose of pesticides, what is that doing to your gut biome, gut bacteria? If you're having a dose of antibiotics for years and years, what is that doing? We understand so little about our gut. But one of the biggest things I've learned on carnivore is that all disease begins in the gut. They've been talking about this for 2,000 years. Depression, anxiety, a lot of the depression I had, I always thought that's something wrong with my brain, but there's a lot of that is rooted in the gut. Serotonin's made in the gut. There's the gut-brain axis, the immune system tied to the gut. And I had a woman on my channel, she was talking about gut biome and gut bacteria, and she fully admitted we know very little. It's like the ocean, or it's like the human brain. We probably know 2 or 3% of what's actually happening there, but I really believe after doing some more research that that's a bigger part of the puzzle, and maybe a reason that we're healing on carnivore. We're getting rid of the sugar and the junk, which is huge. We're getting into ketosis. My heart, the brain performs much more efficiently in ketosis. It helps with insulin levels. It gets rid of inflammation. But I also think a big part of it is gut bacteria, gut biome that we're yet to discover all of the science behind. But I think anyone could agree, like plant toxins, pesticides, antibiotics, glyphosates, microplastics, food dyes, like all of this stuff for years and years and decades, it's destroying our guts. It's just crazy. It's a sobering reality, but avoiding those things for me leaves me with just meat beef, butter, bacon, eggs, and I do best on just ruminant animals, beef. And I think given the day and time we live in and the circumstances and the options we have, that's the proper human diet with what we have available to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd agree, really with all of that. Let's talk a little bit about this documentary, if you could. So this Healing Humanity movie that you're making, and I mean, I've seen the teaser trailer. I know you mentioned Jordan Peterson, obviously tweeting about it. It's getting a lot of traction. Tell everyone, what it is, like why you're doing this. Why is this important?
Yeah, well, you're making me realize why it's more important with this discussion. Part of the thing is all of these people that are hopeless and they can't get this information from their doctor. There's a lot of people, yourself included, that are doing great work on YouTube to get the word out about carnivore diet, proper human diet. But initially, I'm like, YouTubers are kind of weird. Like I watch a lot of YouTube, but we're a small subset of the whole population, right? I'm like, we could be reaching so many more people with the documentary. And there's been a lot of documentaries throughout my life that have really helped me. In fact, that's how I learned about the ketogenic diet, was through a documentary many years ago on Netflix. So my whole thought was, why isn't there a documentary on carnivore? This is so powerful. I'm seeing such incredible healing. We're only talking about it on YouTube. We need a documentary. And then I looked around and I couldn't find one. And then I was kind of pissed off because I'm like, man, one of these experts, doctors like Dr. Barry or somebody, he's been talking about this for so long. I wish they would do one. But there wasn't one. There wasn't anyone doing it. So I said, very foolishly, honestly, let's just do a documentary. How hard could that be? And we decided to do it. The thing that I decided to do differently that I'm really happy with and I'm excited about is we're getting into the science in our documentary of a ketogenic diet. But there's lots of documentaries that get into it. Carnivore is just a stricter version of a ketogenic diet. It's the ultimate ketogenic diet. But what I really wanted to focus on for our documentary was these stories, because that's what's inspired me, Dante Ferrigno. I think that's what's inspiring a lot of people is they see someone on YouTube that found this incredible healing, and then we can relate to them. So I'm like, I want to just follow real individuals doing a carnivore diet for many different health issues. The main one, depression, anxiety, but also obesity, type 2 diabetes, fertility issues, fatty liver. Let's see what happens when they do it for 1 year and just share the good or the bad. And that's how it all started. I've been doing YouTube videos on carnivore like crazy, and I've been getting just tons of comments from people. And the first person we found was Bill Knott. He was 700 pounds in Alaska, horrible black dark hole depression, stuck in his house for 5 years, hadn't left his house. He was too big to leave, too depressed to leave. And we went out and filmed him. That was a year ago. And we just went and filmed him 1 year later. My daughter Emma and I did. And he's down 270 pounds in 1 year. He overcame the depression in weeks. It was a couple of weeks into carnivore. He called me. He's like, this is incredible, Kerry. My mood is drastically improved. And he also was so shocked because he said, the knee pain and lower back pain that I've had for 10, 15 years now is gone in 3 weeks on carnivore. He's like, how could that happen? I'm like, inflammation, Bill. Your inflammation goes away real quick on carnivore, and a lot of people report those early gains like that. So so we're filming Bill. We're filming several other individuals for 1 year. We filmed 32 people so far. We're just filming a couple for 1 year. That's the hard part. Like you commit to someone for 1 year. Do they stick to it? Does it work? Well, we've committed to 3 people, all of them sticking to it. We just filmed Bill 1 year later. Another person we're filming is Mimi. She had Parkinson's, and we're checking everyone's medical records. It's all everything I'm telling you is backed by people's medical records. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's, a full-blown stroke, not a mini stroke like I had. And she had this horrible blood infection. She was in the hospital for like 2 months. It almost killed her. She could barely walk. And we're going to be filming her 1 year later in just a couple months. She's going to be hiking the St. Francis of Assisi Trail. It's a 500-mile hike. It's going to take her a month. She's training for it every day now. She's running, jogging, lifting weights. She's just a completely different person now. After having Parkinson's, it's just, some of these stories are just crazy and unbelievable. But that's the goal, is to share these stories to inspire other people. And the last thing I'll say, because I'm sorry I'm rambling, is we're doing the documentary, but we're also doing a series now too, because there's so many stories. The documentary would be 8 hours long. Like, we can't do it justice. And in the last month or two, the number of stories that have been coming out of the woodwork is just blowing my mind. So we're going to do a series where we'll have an episode all on cancer. We'll have an episode on type 2 diabetes. So whatever your health ailment or issue is, You could see it in the documentary, but we'll also have a full dedicated episode with doctors, experts, and individuals that went through that.
What would you say to someone that says this is a fad diet? Like
Oh
after you've
man.
just said all of that.
Yeah, the standard American diet is a fad diet, in my opinion. We are so myopic as humans. It's like this is the way it's always been. But if you look at all of mankind since the beginning of time, I'm going to steal this from Dr. Berry. For as long as we've been breathing air and drinking water, we've been eating meat. Now, all of a sudden, meat's causing cancer. Now, all of a sudden, meat's causing heart disease. And all of these diseases and things correlate perfectly with the standard American diet and consumption of seed oils and sugar and junk that we were never intended to eat. The carnivore diet isn't a fad diet. We've literally been eating this way since the start of time. It's the most even if you don't believe that, if you just objectively look at all of the options of what you can eat right now, like I said earlier, it's the most natural, uninflammatory food we can eat. You eat a fatty ribeye, it has everything in the proper proportions, all of the nutrients and minerals you need to survive. You don't have to supplement anything. For 600 days now, that's all I've eaten. I don't need to take like some vitamins or, if you're on a plant-based diet, you have to take like 12 vitamins or supplements or you will die. You don't need that with meat. It is our ancestrally appropriate diet that we've been eating since the start of time. I know for a lot of people, this sounds crazy. It sounded absolutely crazy to me, but when you really dig into it and do the research, the last thing I'll say on it too, real quick, I love this analogy, but there's millions of species on this planet. Every one of these species has an intended or natural diet. Like a cow naturally eats grass. Most of these species eat like one thing and they're all thriving. And none of them have heart disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, all of these ailments and issues. Humans are the only ones that are messing it up with our big brains, thinking that we have to eat a million different foods as we're getting sicker and sicker and saying, oh, this is normal. And what I'm doing is a fad diet. People that are suffering cancer and heart disease and strokes and all of these things, they're eating the standard American diet. They're not eating like I'm eating. You should be worried about what you're eating. You should be worried about inflammation and poor metabolic health, not what we're doing here.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. I mean, you're interesting. You compare it to say vegetarian and vegan diets and the pills. I mean, maybe not quite so vegetarian if they're eating maybe eggs, drinking milk, perhaps, but like a vegan diet. By definition, if you don't supplement vitamin B12, you literally die. Like it's just how people can think that a vegan diet is a natural human diet and it's good for humans when you literally need a pill to survive, otherwise you will quite literally die. And then they say carnivore's a fad diet. I always say to people, like if you just went out into the forest, that forest behind you, I don't know if that's real or fake. That looks so beautiful behind you.
It's real. It's real. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. It looks so beautiful. If you went out into that forest right now, like what would you find to eat? If you were just you had to there's no supermarkets around, all of these things. Like what would you find to eat?
There's nothing out there. There's some wild turkey and some deer, which would be excellent to eat. And then about 1 week out of the year, we get a couple wild berries, and they're there for a week, and that's
Yeah.
it. There's nothing. I love that sort of thought experiment too. And by the way, I'm in Wisconsin and it's about to start snowing right now. There's going to be snow on the ground for months. There's nothing to eat out there except meat and a handful of berries maybe for 1 week.
That's it. And I mean, imagine the whole planet is that forest behind you before kind of civilization. Uh, where were the farms? Like where you wouldn't have gone digging around in the ground randomly for like a potato because you'd probably die before you even found one because you just used all your energy. You're gonna hunt, you're gonna get meat, and that's like 99% of your diet because there's just nothing else out there to even eat. So
Yeah.
I think it really is to me a pretty obviously the basis of a proper human diet. As you said, the standard American diet. All these people. I was just reading something earlier, saying younger and younger people now are getting cancer, and there's no one's. What kind of pisses me off is no one's stopping and saying why.
Right.
It's like I was saying to someone the other day, I was speaking to a couple of patients yesterday in my clinic, saying, there were women who were talking about carnivore oxalates and breast cancer. And, I was saying with breast cancer now, we're seeing like 20-year-olds with breast cancer, and it's almost become normalized.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how sad is that?
It's so true. It's so sad. Everything, I think part of it is because most of humanity is walking around in this brain fog. We look for routines and we normalize things that shouldn't be normal. Some of it happens slowly over time, but even just looking around in the general public right now, and 70% of people are overweight. That's crazy. That's not normal. Like even when I was younger, you'd have like one or two guys that were overweight. Now 7 out of 10 of them are. The cancer thing, the children thing, that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the documentary as well. I'm like I said before, I'm a grown man now. I figured this out for myself, but this normalizing this for the next generation, getting these kids hooked on sugar it's like getting them hooked on cigarettes. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
would say that's pretty bad. Let's get a 4-year-old hook on a cigarette. We're doing it with sugar and cartoon characters on cereal boxes. And I was so unhealthy with all of those issues I mentioned to you. I ate pretty darn bad. This next generation of kids, they're eating way worse than I am. I was like the processed generation. They're the ultra processed generation, walking around with their sugar drinks. It's like Starbucks just completely filled with sugar. The fact that the cancer rates, pre-diabetic children, obesity rates amongst children, it's just, I really think 20, 30 years from now, history is going to look back on us and say, what were we doing? Also,
Yeah.
there's people at the higher up. I don't think it's some conspiracy theory. It's just, it's greed run amok. But there are people whose wallets are getting thicker and thicker while our children are getting cancer and getting diabetes and getting sicker and sicker at the expense of their health and lives. People getting limbs amputated. Like, some of the stuff that's normalized just blows my mind. I was talking to someone the other day, a nurse, and she's like, it really frustrates me seeing these unnecessary amputations. And I had to stop and think about it. I'm like, yeah, throughout all of mankind, there were never amputations other than someone blew their leg off in war or an accident. People are getting their limbs amputated now because they're choosing to eat this food. And then, by the way, they get the limb amputated and they're still eating the food. They're just in that's how broken the system is, and how addicted they are, and how normalized things are. People losing their vision from foods they're eating. My CPAP machine I used to think that was bad. Like in retrospect, I'd have to strap an apparatus to my face so I wouldn't stop breathing and die at night because I'm choosing to eat this food. And people are losing their vision and limbs because they're choosing to eat this food. And you're absolutely right. We've normalized it. It's just this slow process. Well, I guess that's just the way it is. It's craziness.
Yeah. It is. It's shocking. I mean, people do just think that's the way it is. That's just how you live life. Like that's just what happens to you. Which you say it's not a conspiracy, and it's not, but it's teetering on that edge, isn't it? Of at what point is it actually intentional? We're so far gone from what a normal human diet should be. At what point do you start to think, is it actually just a conspiracy, or is it just pure coincidence that people are just getting bigger and bigger, fatter and fatter wallets off of people? I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that line, but
No, I'm with you. I go between the two sometimes. It's like, is this some try to reduce the population or something? But then when I go to the conspiracy, then I just go back to addiction. And I think it's almost like a mass psychosis. The majority of humanity is addicted to sugar and carbohydrates. That's why I yo-yo dieted. That's why the ketogenic diet didn't work for me, because I tried to moderate this addiction. You can't moderate an addiction. And when you have that addiction too, you're in denial, so that doesn't help. And then also you have this brain fog stupor. That's the biggest thing I've learned interviewing carnivores. Every one of them says I have brain fog, and every one of them says I didn't realize how bad that fog was until I got out of it. So you got this majority of humanity just plopping down on the couch and doing the bare minimum, and they go with these social norms, and that's just the way it is, sort of thing. It's kind of hard to break. It's almost like the perfect storm of things. And then it makes a lot of money. And it's like every little optimization is made to make that thing make more money. You demonize meat in all the studies. You get people hooked on the pharmaceuticals, and it just keeps doling out more and more money. They just keep doing all those things without ever stopping to think about it. But I don't know. I'm with you. I teeter on both of them. It's almost so crazy. It seems like it's got to be a conspiracy.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, I genuinely don't think it is, but it's so close to that. You just how could we go so far wrong? But you're right. I mean, I saw a 13-year-old the other day with pretty bad fatty liver, and like this kid is 13, 1-3, a child, a teenager, and they've got fatty liver, and they're quite clearly grossly overweight as well. And so as a child, you are basically metabolically protected. You really have to try pretty hard to screw yourself up metabolically as a child. And yet we're now seeing this in more and more younger and younger people. You mentioned anxiety. This same kid has just terrible crippling anxiety. They haven't been to school in like 6 months, and because of anxiety. And I spoke to them about dietary change, which I do with all of my patients, and they're just kind of not really interested, because it's so normalized with him, with the parents, that this is just the way things are. Yeah. And you mentioned mass psychosis. I mean, that might be part of it. I do think that there is a again, as this mass gaslighting. People have been convinced that this is life. This is what happens. The human condition, so to speak. You just get sick and die.
Right. That one really gets me too. As I've been doing the documentary more, I have all these different reasons. Like I said, the kids. The other one is that I really feel like the majority of humanity, we're dying in our 70s now, and it's going down in the United States. I think it's like the low 70s. Well, I really truly believe we'd all be living into our 100s if we ate this proper way our whole time. I did 40 years of just sugar and junk, and high chronic systemic inflammation leads to all sorts of disease. Imagine had I never done that. I think I'd have no problem living to be 100. I know Dr. Chafee's talked about telomeres and things like that. A lot of the science shows that people should be living that long. But what a tragedy. But nobody realizes this is just the way it is. But what a historic tragedy that humans could be thriving to 100.
Yeah.
And we're dying at 70 and we think it's okay. And on the children point too, the thing that is really, really upsetting about that is this is their most formidable years, where their brains are growing, their bodies are growing, and they're chronically inflamed with fatty liver, which ruins their hormones, gives them anxiety, all sorts of downstream effects from that as well. It's just insane. And I feel you though too, because like you're there, you see this kid, you want to help him, and what do? They don't listen. That's why, not to try to bring everything back to the documentary, but not just the documentary, just getting these examples out there through your YouTube channel. I'm interviewing a guy later today, Dave Mack. He's interviewed 700 carnivores on his channel. I think getting those stories out, that's the only way I've been able to find. When I find someone like that young kid that you talked about, it doesn't always work. It doesn't rarely works, but sometimes the only thing I've ever found that can kind of work is like, look, here's an example of another kid like you that was overweight, finding like a close example to what they're going through and showing to them. That's the only thing that seems to help me. Otherwise, it's just usually you can inspire them that way. It's inspiration or desperation. And sadly, most people wait for desperation, and then they end up with a colostomy bag or stage 4 cancer or something. And unfortunately, it's too late, or an amputation.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time because we are running out of time a little bit, but something you said there, Kerry, I don't know if you've seen this research. There was an article published quite recently, actually, and it basically is I think a really good example of how the whole system is just kind of set up, against meat, and this narrative that meat's bad. And the title of this article, the title of the news story and so on around it was, meat causes cancer, which it doesn't. And it was, we finally have a reason, we have a mechanistic reason now how meat causes cancer. And it was about telomere extension and this telomerase enzyme. And it was saying that the iron found in meat, so heme iron, so it doesn't seem to happen with non-heme iron from plants, but heme iron in animals, activates this telomerase enzyme, which extends telomeres. And what they're saying is, well, this may be how cancer grows, because it's kind of helping the cells to live longer. Now, when I read that, all I see is red meat makes you live longer.
Right, right,
Extends your telomeres. And I'm like, hang on, like that's a great thing. Red meat helps you live longer. And all
right.
these like billions of dollars, trillions of dollars probably being put into telomere extension, longevity medicine, all of these things is actually the solution there underneath our noses all along,
Yeah.
sitting on the plate, and it's actually just meat. But no, we have to frame it that meat's bad. It's like, just how insane is that?
It's nuts. Every one of these studies too, it just goes to show you, you could twist it any way you want. They have a motivation, some sort of bias, and they can twist it that way. So many of these studies too, man, that was one of the big things I learned doing carnivore. Bunch of garbage, so much garbage in these studies. Like, unless you have two identical people and you're testing them, there's just so many of these observational studies as well. It's just complete garbage. But on the longevity, just real quick there, one of the people we're filming for our documentary is rancher Maggie. She's been eating carnivore for
Mm.
65 years. She's just ripped. She's got muscle. She's got a full head of blonde hair. And she's 83 years old now, and she's just absolutely thriving and full of energy. That's what the world could be like, or what 83-year-olds would be like, I think, if we weren't eating this way.
Yeah, I reckon it could be. I mean, my wife's uncle, he's pretty kind of famous in the family for just always just kind of violently refusing vegetables. And pretty much he's not quite 60 yet, but he's getting close, I think. And he doesn't look a day over 40. He's worked on an outback station, been basically a cattle ranch farmer, for all of his life. And he doesn't look a day over 40. He's super fit and healthy. And he barely eats any vegetables at all. And his teeth haven't fallen out and his gut hasn't exploded with poo or any of these other things that people will tell you happens. And it really just made me think, uh, I don't know. Whenever I think of, I don't know where I'm going with that one as well, but it's just, again, because you mentioned Manchuragi, it just leads me to think, like why do kids, like babies, why do they violently refuse vegetables?
Right.
No one's asking these
I
questions.
know. Is there any other instinct that a baby has, and you're like, nope, that was a wrong instinct? They're all
Yeah,
correct. It's
I know.
getting the bitter vegetables because it doesn't want them, and we're force feeding them to the babies. Got to eat
That's
this.
it. It's pure instinct. And I tell people this and they're like, oh yeah, that kind of actually makes a lot of sense. They start to the cogs start to turn. Like a 6-month-old when it's weaning onto solids, like they don't know right or wrong. They don't know naughty. And the parents are just like, oh, they're just being naughty. Like, they're 6 months old. They don't know what naughty is. It's
Right.
pure instinct. And the instinct is just don't eat the vegetables. You give them meat, fat, like, oh my God, they go to town on that.
Yeah, yeah, they have no problem. The naughty thing too is, it just made me smile when you said that, because then you get to the terrible twos, which here in America, it's you get them candy, you're getting them sugar, you're getting them junk, and they're just bouncing off the walls and they're not sleeping at night, so they're naughty again. No, it's what you're
Yeah.
feeding these kids. The carnivore kids I've seen, oh my goodness, it's next level. Just learning, comprehending, attitude, mood, everything. It's imagine, man. I just imagine what the world would be like if children from birth up were eating the proper human diet. It'd be incredible.
Yeah, it's a scary and sobering thought, actually, isn't it? That I've got 4 kids like yourself, and it's a scary thought that how easily it could go wrong, and how actually easy it is to just fix it. But it's scary that so many kids are not having that opportunity. And I guess this is where we come back to your documentary. How how do you think your documentary is going to be received? Because it's not meat is not the kind of I don't know what the word is, but it's not the popular opinion that meat's
Yeah,
good for you.
no, yeah, we're gonna get a lot of hate, I'm sure. Well, initially it was gonna be the carnivore diet documentary, and we've since changed it. It's called Healing Humanity: The Power of a Proper Human Diet. We kept carnivore out because that's gonna scare some people. But we have a woman in our documentary. She overcame stage 4 cancer with a strict plant-based ketogenic diet. She's grown a lot of her own plants and things like that. So what I'm really advocating for in the documentary, and kind of the end of it, will be returning to what is natural for humans. I think if you look on a chart, as we escape further and further from what's natural, we're getting sicker and sicker. Cancer rates are going crazy. I think the main way we can do that is through nutrition. I think given the options, like I said earlier, carnivore is probably the best option for that. Maybe if we changed some of our practices and didn't have glyphosate and microplastics and pesticides and everything, maybe some plants would be better. But that's really the end message is going to be, let's just return to natural, mainly through the foods we're eating, but also everything else. That's another thing that happened to me on carnivore is like, I'm getting exercise. I get out in the morning, I get sunshine in my eyes. I'm not wearing suntan lotion. I'm not putting chemicals all over my body anymore. Fresh air, exercise, breathing, like all of those things are what humans would have done naturally throughout the start of time. People are going to argue it anyways, but I think it's harder to argue. Like, just return to natural. Like, any side should be able to objectively agree with that. But we're fully ready to get some hate either way. I get it on my YouTube channel all the time.
Yeah, I'm laughing because that's what I say to patients. You know, at the end of the day, like whatever route you choose, just go down that natural route. And we're so far removed. You know, here in Australia, there's been a campaign, you know, against things like skin cancer for the last, 30 or so years. This slip, slop, slap campaign. You know, put your clothes on, cover up. You know, put sunscreen on. You know, wear a hat. And sunglasses and so on. And there's no doubt like it's reduced rates of skin cancer and so on, but they're still increasing, all the time. It's just reduced how quickly it's increasing. But it makes you think when you mentioned, you're not burned. There's like carnivores don't burn in the sun. I mean, you might get a tiny bit red. I mean, here in Australia, you stand outside in 40-degree heat and bright sunshine at midday for 3 hours, you probably will get a sunburn. But like I used to burn like crazy.
Right.
And I've got a slightly darker skin tone. I'm quite kind of olivey skinned. But I used to burn like crazy. My mum still tells everyone the story. She like says hello to someone in the supermarket and like, oh, my son used to burn really bad. I'm not, this is what parents, I don't know why parents do these things. A total strangers telling all the kids stories. But I used to burn pretty bad. I remember having terrible sunburns. Like now I just literally just bake in the sun all day and I don't even get red. My wife's a redhead. So she's got basically like zero melanin in her body, right? And she would just burn through clothes. Like she would put sunscreen on in the car here in Australia, driving around through like SPF 50 tinted windows because it should still burn. Prior to basically, she does more animal based than carnivore, but all the seed oils, like all of that's gone.
Right.
And she just she hasn't used sunscreen really in like 2 years.
I a lot of people got upset with me when I started talking about this, but I've thought about it a lot more too. And it's like, it's interesting that so many carnivores overcome these crazy skin issues, psoriasis and all these skin issues recover. So maybe that's a little indicator, because I get people that tell me like, you're so dumb. You think you're going to eat meat and you're not going to get sunburn anymore? Like, how is that even possible? But I think the skin is more susceptible to burning when we're eating these unnatural foods and seed oils and things. And you're inflamed. Your skin's inflamed. Your body's inflamed. So it makes sense that you're less susceptible to burn. But I really noticed it myself. I was roofing a building, which, by the way, I never would have done before carnivore. And this was a couple months into carnivore. I was outside for 14 hours, no sunscreen on. And I was with an Amish friend of mine that was helping me roof. He got burnt. And by the end of it, my skin was red. The sun was just baking. My skin was a little red and then it went away and there was no burn. And the next day I thought I'm going to be just wrecked, like my muscles for working this hard. And I'm going to be completely fried and burnt, like that painful sunburn. Didn't have either of those things. So I think a big part of it is that I always question people too. I'm like, so before the invention of sunscreen, we were just dropping like flies from skin cancer left and right.
I know it makes no sense, does it? And I mean, the argument there is, well, people died at 23, back in the day, and actually, no, they probably didn't. We actually don't know because skeletons stop aging, bones stop aging around 23 years old. I think that's the age anyway, and so it was just assumed that they all died at 23. Back in the day, ancient times. Actually, they could have lived to 120. But the bones will still say 23 years old because there was no signs of cancer. There was no signs of osteoporosis. There were none of these signs of old age illnesses. And so they must have died young. What if they just didn't have those illnesses?
Right. Well, a lot of people mess it up too because they look at the average life expectancy, not accounting for babies dying during birth. I get that one all the time. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The thing too is I always tell people, I'm like, I'm not telling you what to do either. Like if you want to wear suntan lotion, go for it. But what I would suggest is look at the ingredients on the suntan lotion you're getting, because there's some crazy stuff in some of that. And I never realized this. I'm learning more and more on carnivore, but I think it's something like 70% of what you put on your skin ends up in your bloodstream. I may be messing that number up, but it was some crazy number. I'm like, oh, I never really knew that. So these crazy ingredients in the suntan lotions getting into your bloodstream, there could be other effects from it. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly, I've got to say, I'm guilty of telling people in the past. I remember conversations, I do a lot of skin work here in Australia as well, a lot of skin cancer here, and telling people, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Like the evidence shows it does get into your body, but there's been studies, there's no harm from it and so on. And now, like, I just think I like it offends me that I said that to people, now, because there's no doubt it will have an effect. There's really no doubt. We don't have those long-term studies to say that it doesn't, just short-term studies. There's really no doubt it would have an effect. But I tell people now, look, things like seed oils, take those out. You're far less likely to get skin cancer, less likely to burn, and so on. And there is logic and evidence to support that. But I'm conscious of time, Kerry. We've been over an hour now, so it's been an absolutely amazing conversation. I feel like we could just talk all day. I always feel like this with my guests. There's so much we could just talk about. We haven't even touched half of it on here. I wanted to ask about things like, carnivore and without a gallbladder and so on. But, we can touch on those maybe perhaps another time. But you're obviously doing it fine, and there's really no issues with that.
Yep. Yeah, doing it great. And yeah, I just want to say it's been great talking to you. I really enjoy this. Open invite if you ever want to come back on my channel or do a live stream or something.
Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly look at arranging that. Obviously, your Healing Humanity documentary, I'll put all the links in the episode description, of course. But how can people find that? How can people find you, connect with you on social media, follow your amazing channel, and so on?
Yeah, the documentary is at healinghumanity.movie. And you can actually register there because, like I said, we're going to be doing this series, and I have a feeling it'll go on forever. So if you want to share your story, if you think you've got a powerful story you want to share. And in terms of YouTube, my channel is still called Homesteadhow because it started as a homesteading channel. But I've got probably a couple hundred videos that's all I do now is carnivore videos, interviewing folks and talking about carnivore diet in the documentary. So those would be the two.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Well, I'll make sure I put all those links in the show notes. I absolutely just massive respect for you and what you're trying to do with this documentary. I think it is so unbelievably important. And when I heard about it, I was just like, this is just going to be amazing. This will hopefully be a game changer, much more than the Game Changers documentary.
Right. I hope so.
That popped up on my Netflix feed. I was like, do you know me? Like, no, I'm not watching that. This has been so much fun, Kerry. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Meat Medic podcast. We'll see you in the next one.